Welcome to the Compassionate Capitalist Show. Thank you for tuning in again today. If this is your first time, you just heard our overview. If you're listening on through a podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, let me just say, what we do here is all about teaching people to create wealth through being a successful entrepreneur or an investor or both, so that they can pursue their passions and live the life they want to live and benefit the world in the process. That is compassionate capitalism. That is the compassionate capitalist movement. And so what's really great is that my guest today, Ryan Chaw, he reached out to me as an investor and fan of my podcast, the Compassionate Capitalist Show. And he told me that one of the shows that he listened to inspired him because my guest made the point that your mission should be enough to hold your attention, something worthwhile. And Ryan's mission is to show others one possible path to financial independence, while at the same time saving students a lot of money in their housing. So there's a win-win there. And in and of itself, it's capitalism making money, but also bringing benefit to the folks that he's serving with his investment. And Ryan is on his way to becoming a self-made millionaire by the age of 28 through his real estate investing, and with the intention to use that wealth to invest in innovation that he is passionate about as an angel investing. We'll talk more about that. And today you'll learn how he used college town investing and targeted advertising to create a six-figure rental portfolio in California, even during COVID, where most houses are overpriced and cash flow is limited. He'll also share how he created a reliable system for self-managing 6 single-family homes while still working his full-time pharmacist job. It involves attracting high-quality tenants, tenant empowerment, and creating the right team. And he's also going to share the completely avoidable mistake that cost him over $30,000 on his first investment, and how new real estate investors can make sure to avoid them. And particularly, I love his house hack. Call it the house hack, living in one and renting out the rest kind of a thing. And you'll learn more about that strategy as you listen today. So as I said, Ryan is an example of our core listener of men and women seeking to increase their wealth through successful entrepreneurship, investing, or both. And they can pursue their passions and make the world a better place as the compassionate capitalist movement. And so we hope as you are inspired by these shows that you will reach out to me as Ryan did, but also share it with others. Share this show with others that are, considering getting started in investing, particularly real estate investing. And like, for example, I was super excited about this. My daughter's 24, and I'm sharing this as soon as we record it and get it live. I'm sharing it with her because I want her to do what Ryan has done here in Atlanta. So with that, let's get started. So tell us more about, well, first, welcome, say hi to everybody.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Karen. I'm honored to be on the podcast.
So terrific. Okay. Tell us a bit about your, your background. One, how did you, because you have a unique story with your relationship with your grandpa out there in the San Francisco Bay Area. And but also choosing to go into pharmacy as a career, and then some key, I guess, crossroads in life that led you to your aha moments and to why you're sitting here today to share your expertise with our audience.
Yeah, so it actually started out with my grandpa. He bought a couple properties in the San Francisco Bay Area back in the 1950s. And back then, the properties were, of course, dirt cheap. And we all know that over time, the real estate market boomed in the Bay Area. And he was not only able to cover his expenses, his living expenses with the rental income he was making from his properties, but also able to give back to his family. So he was able to cover part of my college tuition and that of my brothers as well. So that's when I realized that real estate is one of the best ways to create generational wealth for not only your family, but also your communities. A story that happened to me is when I was 2 years old, I had a life-threatening anaphylactic reaction to a cashew. And my mom had to actually give me an EpiPen to save my life, essentially. And so one of the things I wanted to do is to build enough wealth So not only can I live life on my own terms, be able to do what I want, where I want, with whomever I want to do it with, but also be able to support my family, my kids, and my community. And one of my big goals is to actually give back $100,000 each year to medical research that I support, especially medical research in allergy development and finding cures for allergies, and just charities that I support as well.
Yeah, and the thing that's great about that is you're choosing your path, because I think you realize that the traditional path of a W-2 and saving, it's really, really difficult to save your way to wealth, right? And then you made a decision that the W-2 wasn't going to be that. I mean, in fact, the purpose of my book was to help W-2 type folks that may have had a longer career than you had in your job as a pharmacist, but and they've reached an income level, and they've saved in a 401k enough that they would qualify as an investor to get started, but also at all the levels that you can play as an angel investor. And it was targeted towards that. So I love the fact that you had those similar aha moments, to pursue real estate, because that is something that there's a lot of education out there. And of course, you've got a resource for that, which, while I'm speaking about it, let me just go ahead and tell folks, website to go to is newbierealestateinvesting.com/guide. And newbie is NEWBIE, and real estate investing is as you would expect. And of course, that link is in the show notes. So talk about, besides, because, one of the things that folks talk about, right now, we're dealing with, increased prices of real estate, and whether it was 50 years ago, income levels were what they are then, to relative to what real estate is worth. And that's sort of the same thing now. And so, that's one of the things that is fairly predictable. We do have bubbles. We might be leading into a bubble right now, but for the most part, real estate always goes up in value. And so getting into it can be a challenge. So talk about what you did when you first had your moment in W-2, and how you accumulated enough money to make your first house purchase, even at the increased values that San Francisco is known for, compared to like your grandpa did back 50 years ago, and that ratio of income to investment challenges.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Yeah, one of the big things you can do actually getting started out in real estate investing is keeping your job, because it actually helps you get conventional financing and some of the most competitive rates. So that's one thing I did. I didn't jump into it full time. I actually built this up on the side while I was working my W-2 job. And what I did at the beginning was I worked a lot of overtime, and I worked 2 jobs to really build up that capital and have the ability to basically scale as fast as possible. But with that being said, I actually didn't have to do that. There's a lot more creative ways to get started in real estate investing. In fact, one of the most common ones a lot of people get started, and I would recommend for a lot of people who are just getting started out, is house hacking, where you basically buy a house for a 3 to 3.5% down payment using a conventional loan or FHA loan. And 3% or 3.5% of, let's say, $500,000 home is only like $15,000 that you would actually need to save up. So you can get started pretty early in your career. In fact, that's kind of like my first property. I was able to buy it within a year or so. And basically, I used this method where I bought a single family home every year. And I would buy it in a local college town and rent it by the bedroom. And when I rented by the bedroom, it actually increased the cash flow of the house, the income I'm getting from the house, by, I would say, anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 to $2,000 per month, because each bedroom I can rent out is about $600 to $800 per month. And let's say I rent out 4 bedrooms, that's already $2,400 in rental income. And if I can get 5 bedrooms, it's around the $3,000 to $3,500 range. And what's great about this market is there's a lot of students who want to save money, want to say, they don't want to have to take as much student loans out. take out all that student debt. And, we're having a student loan crisis right now, right? So they're only paying $600 to stay in one of my bedrooms versus on-campus housing, they charge $1,200. And they don't get as much privacy. They don't get like a backyard, a kitchen. They don't get a garage, and all that kind of independence that comes with living at an off-campus house versus in the dormitories. For the most part, they basically have a bunkmate and then they share a bathroom. They don't really have anything else other than that, right? So it's actually what I consider what's called a blue ocean market. It's an untapped market. I always have a lot of demand every year for this. So, and it's a win-win situation for everyone. The students save a lot of money. Your cash flow is increased. So you have more wealth accumulation. So you can scale much faster. And then again, you can use that extra money to give back to charities or communities of your choice as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So let's talk about, that was how you got your first one with 15 grand that you had saved up. And then what do you do when you look at a property? Because, obviously you had a real estate agent that, was helping you on this, but you really had an idea. You had done the math of what you would be able to stretch when it came to a mortgage you qualified for, but also making it, your cash flow to manage. But there were certain things that you did because you had a very specific intent to turn one investment into another investment. So talk about first off, what is it that you look for when you are looking for an ideal property? And then how do you parlay that into from this one to the next one?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a few parameters I look for. So the first one for real estate in general is always going to be location. I want to be as close to the colleges as possible. So within a 5 to 7 minute drive or 5 to 7 minute walking distance to campus, because if you think about it, students who have to wake up for their 8 a.m. classes, they want to wake up as late as possible and have the shortest commute as possible to reach that 8 a.m. class every day. So that's just getting into the student mindset, right? I also look for houses that are a little bit newer. I wouldn't say like super new, but I would say 1940s or newer than that, because the first house I bought, I actually made this huge mistake. I bought a 100-year-old house and I didn't do my due diligence. Most of the house was actually 100 years old. They didn't actually replace a lot of the parts. So things about like the roof, the HVAC, the sewage system, those are all things that they eventually will break in time, right? So you have to make sure you do your due diligence during the inspection phase to make sure you don't have to spend a lot of money to replace everything like that. Another thing I look for is size. So I look for places that are pretty large square footage so I can add bedrooms and add that value. Like a 1,200 square foot house or more can usually have a fourth bedroom added to it. And a 1,500 square foot or more can usually have enough space for 5 bedrooms. And when I add bedrooms, I usually just repurpose an existing room. It's not like actually adding an addition on the outside of the house.
Okay,
if we have a living room and a family room, students only need one common space, I find. So the family room could be easily made into a bedroom, right? And because students, if you think about it, a single family will want more space compared to students. They have different needs. The student, they're at school most of the time. So they come home to study, eat, sleep, and shower, right? They're not spending all the time in that family room, right? Because they're mostly out most of the time. So that's what I try to do. I repurpose those and look for large square footage homes. Let's see, other things. I try to get a home that's in pretty good condition, of course, so I don't have to replace like too much flooring or do all those renovations that I talked about, like replacing the whole HVAC system, which I had to do for one of my houses, by the way. That's one of my mistakes that we can talk about.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are kind of the things I'm looking for.
Yeah. And then I think what I remember when we first talked, you had this process that after you had been in the house for a while, you calculated a cap rate, your cash on cash ROI, and then made the decision to in effect move to another primary residence because the interest rates and loan rates, particularly as you have a W-2 income, is different versus if you're living in the property versus, just buying another investment property. Is that how you have accumulated your
Yes,
houses?
exactly. That's a good point. If you do owner occupancy, meaning you're living in the property, your interest rate drops about 0.5 to up to 1%. Compared to if you bought it as a non-owner occupied or investment property. So by house hacking, you save yourself not only on like the interest rate, but you also save on like closing costs and just general fees in general. And the good part is as long as you can cover how much the mortgage is, you're essentially living for free, and you're saving all that amount of money and that otherwise would have been lost to rent. So for example, this house that I'm living in is a house hack. My monthly mortgage is $2,300, but I rented out the large room to a couple, and I was able to charge a little bit more because it's a couple for $1,160. Then I rented out another room for I think $830. I might be a little off with the numbers, but it's like $810 or $830, $870, and then another $830, right? And so I'm renting this current one out for about $3,650 per month. So it's not only covering, the mortgage, but also able to produce that cash flow to allow me to, build the wealth and scale the portfolio and what I'm doing.
Yeah. And then like just little nuts and bolts kind of a thing. Do you just divide up the electricity and the utilities, or is it something that's covered in their rent? Some of those things that can be somewhat unexpected. And we do know that sometimes college students are in the habit of leaving lights on and things like that as well, right?
Yeah. So for the most part, at the beginning of when they come in, I will send them a welcome letter that'll detail like things like making sure you turn off all the lights when you go out, making sure like when nobody's at the house, turn off the HVAC, when everyone's going to school, make sure you set the temperature to, low during the winter, high during the summer. But for the most part, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, so for utilities, that was the question. Utilities, I have it split among the tenants equally, and I'll have them actually pay their own utilities because, like you mentioned, they have the potential to abuse the system if they're not paying for the utility bill. So at least this incentivizes them to save energy as much as possible. And like, for example, if they get a bill that's like $100 per tenant, right? They're going to go like, okay, now next month we have to make sure we try to conserve so I don't have to pay that again. So I think it's really important to do that. I did it the other way at first, but then they kind of abused AC during the summer. They would turn it down to like 68 versus, it really only had to be like 75, right? So that kind of incentivizes them again to save energy and to save money.
And there's now, new technology out there that you can digitize that stuff, and you as a landlord could go in and control some of those things as well. If you had a smart house, if you go and add that, I guess it might be cost prohibitive on a 1940s house to make it a smart house, but with Wi-Fi through our electric ports, who knows, right? There's all kinds of technology out there for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, there's actually some thermostats you can program it. So like during like these hours of the day, it automatically drops to, this temperature or whatever, right?
Right.
And I do have houses that have that.
Yeah, we did that. We added that to one of my daughter's apartments because it was just out of control in the way her electric was and stuff. Right. But so you're moving from one to the next, and then you're also using the increased value of the house to get a line of credit as part of, what you have a certain amount of money that you've accumulated, but you also have access to additional capital through line of credits. Talk about how that works when you're trying to use that as a primary and then make an investment.
Yeah, so what Karen's talking about is a home equity line of credit, or a HELOC. And basically what I did is I took a HELOC on my very first property, which utilized the equity that I built up on the property. So houses appreciate in price in general, it doesn't always, but if they appreciate in price, let's say a good 50,000 or 100,000, you can now take that 50,000 or $100,000 out as a line of credit to put that as a down payment on another house. So that's what I did. My first house actually went up $162,000 since I purchased it. So I was able, for my third and fourth house, it was either third and fourth or fourth and fifth, I was able to take out $100,000 home equity line of credit and use that towards the down payments on the fourth and fifth property. And so basically, I kind of joke around that my first house actually bought me two other houses with the same amount of cash, because I didn't have to come out of pocket to pay and put the down payment on the fourth and fifth property.
Yeah. Oh, for the fourth and fifth property. So
Yeah.
you were using your cash flow and working those jobs to get your first few. And then how many houses do you have now?
I have 6 right now.
6 houses now. So, so what do you do when it comes to property management? One of the things that, compared to a condo or an apartment, there's an anticipation that you will have repairs. There's unforeseen with, trees that have branches that fall on the house, or, plumbing that something happens, or you getting up in the middle of the night and going over there and fixing the plumbing on the houses you're not living in. Talk about how you manage the actual, from the purchasing and then through, ownership of them, that cost of repairs and managing the repairs as they happen.
First off, yeah, definitely for the numbers, a lot of people wonder how much should I budget toward repairs and maintenance, right? I recommend about 1 to 2% of the purchase price you budget toward repairs. So if it's like a $300,000 house, that would be $3,000 to $6,000. And that's generally, when I add up all my expenses per year, that's generally around where it falls within $3,000 or $6,000 per year, just for maintenance, landscaping, all of that, all expenses essentially, right? So you want to make sure you budget for that. But I was actually horrible at maintaining my properties at the beginning, especially because I bought an older property and I didn't do my due diligence. I actually, during the inspection phase, you want to make sure that the house is in good condition. So a lot of this is preventative stuff that you can do. What happened on my first house is I got this call at like 11 p.m. on a weekend saying, dude, there's a sewage that's coming out of the kitchen sink, is shooting out of the kitchen sink.
Oh,
it's
no.
all over the kitchen floor right now. And not only that, it's backing out of the showers too. So it's getting onto the bathroom floors. And he was like, oh man, it smells horrible. And I was like, oh my God, what do I do? Right.
Oh,
so
wow.
I just called up all these different people who clean up that type of stuff, and nobody was picking up, right? Because it's on the weekend and it's in the middle of the night. So eventually I found somebody to be able to clean it up and stick a camera down the pipe. And they found that these roots were sticking into the sewage lines. And the sewage line was actually broken because of the roots. So I had to replace the whole line, and that cost me like $9,000.
Wow.
Not only that, I had an HVAC that was essentially non-existent. The AC just wasn't working anymore. The duct system was broken. So I had to replace that whole AC system. That cost me $15,000. But all this could have been avoided if I just did my inspections during the escrow period of the house when I was closing on the house. So if I just did an HVAC inspection, if I did a sewage lateral line inspection, that would have been able to catch that beforehand. And so I could go to the seller and say, hey, this is what we're seeing. It looks like that these repairs will need to be made on the house, or this will potentially break down within the next year or so. Is there any credit or cash that you can put from the proceeds of the sale? Because they're getting paid in cash at the end, right? Maybe pay some of that towards at least making sure that this house is being sold in a good condition, right? So it's kind of like getting into that negotiation part, but that's all preventative stuff. As far as like repairing it when problems come up, I kind of have a team of contractors. So it's very important you create a network in the area you're investing in. So ask your real estate agent, what contractors have you used to do flooring? What do you recommend to put up a wall to create a bedroom? And really develop your network so you have a handyman that can come by to fix small things like appliance issues, appliances not working, for example. And then you also have a general contractor who can do larger projects like putting up those walls to create the bedroom, maybe expanding the bathroom from a half bath to a full bath, those types of projects. So larger projects. And then just have a backup contractors as well. And so creating that team allows me to basically, when something breaks down, the tenant will text me and then I'll forward it to the contractor. Another software out there that people can use is something called Tenant Cloud. And I'm not affiliated with them or anything, but some of the people I work with and show this process, mentor them through this process, they say that Tenant Cloud works very well because the tenants can input their request, maintenance request into Tenant Cloud, and it'll automatically tell the proper contractor, hey, this is the problem. This is what needs to be fixed. So basically just trying to automate the whole process. I created this system over the years. I really went through a lot of trial and error to eventually create the system and processes and put those in place to automate everything for me. So I'm not getting calls, again, at midnight trying to fix this
Yeah.
sewage problem, right?
So is that something that is available in that information's in your guide that's at newbierealestateinvesting.com?
Yeah. So if you sign up for that, you'll actually get the free guide, which will go over my student housing strategy. And you will also get a lot of tips from me, like my newsletter, as well as tips for, basically the journey that I went through and what I did to get around a lot of these problems that came up for me. And just like how I also scaled and built that portfolio in such a quick amount of time. Right now, I don't think I mentioned it yet, but right now my portfolio is 6 single family homes, and it's making $17,580 per month in
Yeah.
rental income. So it
Yeah.
was in the span of about 5 years as well. And so, just kind of using this strategy has allowed me to build up that much wealth so that I can, again, support my family, travel a little bit more, and then eventually give back $100,000 a year to my community. This year, I
Right.
actually donated about a couple thousand to like American Cancer Society, and then some relatives that were on hard times and all of that. So yeah.
That's nice to be able to help out your family that way.
Yeah.
So yeah, well, so now for folks, that maybe talk about the pros and cons why you chose to develop this network for maintaining and repairing the homes that you own versus using a property management firm, because a lot of investors use property management firms. I use a property management firm because I didn't want to have to figure that stuff out. And the ones I use, charge anywhere from 7% to 10% of your monthly income plus a portion of the first month's rent. So
Yeah.
how does that work? And then would they work with something like you have done? I guess you used pad split. Is that the way how you found the students to split your home, or is that just something that you had called it?
Oh no, so Pad Split's another it's kind of like an app that you can not app, but it's also a company that basically does this strategy where they rent out by the bedroom. So it's not really an app that I use or anything like that. But I do I have a lot of automated things. So one thing, for example, is when a tenant complains about another tenant, right? You'll get somebody saying, hey, this other guy's not doing his dishes. He's leaving a huge mess around the house, a lot of trash, all that type of stuff, right? And so what I do is I have this like templated email that basically says, why don't you first do this? Go have a face-to-face discussion with the tenant you're complaining about first. Explain why you're upset. Come up with an actionable plan that you can implement so this doesn't happen in the future. Then go ahead and implement the plan. And after 2 weeks, if you're still having trouble, then you can come to me. And like 9 times out of 10, that solves the issue. And if it doesn't, you can always go to, if it gets really out of hand, you can go potentially to one of the student's parents and say, hey, this is kind of what's going on at the house. Can you help me out here or something like that?
Oh,
And so
sure.
most of
As
this
the
is
landlord that
automated.
way.
I would say I spend like less than an hour a week just maintaining the properties because I use this tenant empowerment method that I just mentioned. And I have, systems in case something goes wrong. So like, let's say the microwave stops working. Well, the first troubleshooting step is to turn off the breaker and turn it back on. Right. So I basically have these kind of instructions for them if something were to happen. Or, if they do still have trouble after they do the troubleshooting steps, and usually I would say half the time, at least the troubleshooting will fix the problem. If they still have problems with it, I'll just have the handyman go in and take a look and fix whatever problem comes up.
Yeah. And I think in most property management firms are either doing like the Airbnb model where you're rotating renters, or they're doing a long-term tenant. That's, some of those things that you just described that are a little bit of hand holding, a little bit of, how do you adjust to life and be on your own, but also dealing with multiple people that are paying independently.
Mhm.
Yeah, that may be outside the realm of what property management firms are capable of doing. It's the convenience of knowing who to call and not getting those calls in the middle, or getting, and the rent collection process, they help with that and the marketing. But if you're willing to put the time in and do it yourself, and I guess your location sort of automatically sets you up to be a good renter. And I know around like a lot of schools, you get a word of mouth going about where houses are, and a student that's moving on or graduating, they already know somebody that wants to move into their spot. Do you find that?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you have high quality tenants. But what's really cool is after you have a bunch of the tenants, like right now I have around 28 tenants, each one of those tenants knows another 3 or 5 friends, right, that might want to stay at the house. So 28 times 5, that's almost like 150 people potentially interested in renting out my house. So nowadays I just go through word of mouth. I get random people contacting me and saying, hey, I heard you have houses near campus. I'd like to stay at one of them, right? So that kind of makes the whole marketing process that much easier for me, because I have the certain scale in that particular market, in that particular area. But at the beginning, I did actually have to do my own marketing and management, as I mentioned. As far as, I think you mentioned like payments as well. What I do for rent collection is I use an app called Zelle. And Zelle basically will tell you when they pay, who paid, and everything, right? And so that I can, keep track of that and on an Excel sheet, and then send them when they have late rent. Now, there's another app, like I mentioned, Tenant Cloud, where it'll automatically tell the tenant when they pay late rent. So if it keeps track of when they pay rent, but if it's paid late, it will charge them a fee, and it'll send them an email saying, hey, your rent is late. So that's one way if you wanted to automate the rent collection process. But other than that, it's mainly just marketing and management. So marketing, I'll go through the prime method. This is the method I use to find high quality tenants. It's called prime because it's finding prime tenants, right? The P stands for placement of advertisements. So that you want to place your ads where your target tenants are hanging out. Because if you place it in another place where they're not hanging out, it's like fishing in an empty pond, essentially, right? So I want to think about, where do students hang out? Starbucks, cafes, maybe bulletin boards. So maybe I'll have somebody print out the flyer and paste it on the bulletin boards for me, or I'll look through Facebook groups for like off-campus housing, student college groups. I'll get into those and then advertise my housing in those groups. And so I want to place it and get right in front of their eyeballs, right?
Yeah.
The R stands for reviewing social media. So once they reach out to me after seeing one of my ads, I'll go through their social media, like their Facebook and Instagram or wherever I can find online, to try to see what type of tenant they are. I'll look for things like smoking, drugs, alcohol, raves, all that type of stuff. And I'll
Yeah.
make sure they're not like a party type tenant, right? If I
Sure.
can. I stands for identifying the type of tenant. So do they get angry easily? Are they difficult to communicate with? Are they very picky? Are they going to have problems down the road? So I'm trying to find tenants that are going to be very low maintenance tenants, right? Usually tenants that are like already in grad school, like pharmacy, dental students, nursing school, or maybe juniors and seniors in college, where they're at that stage where they're really focused on passing their classes, getting that degree, getting that doctorate degree or whatever, for example. And, I try to find that type of tenant. M stands for measuring responsiveness. So I find that the more responsive somebody is, the more responsible they are in general. So if they're getting their paperwork back to me very quickly and filling it out to completion, they're probably a responsible professional tenant. And then E stands for ensuring proof of income. So you have to ensure that they can afford the rent. And usually that's through the parents, because it's actually the parents for the most part that pay the rent. So what's great about this is you never have to worry about evictions or unpaid rent, because what parent is going to stop paying rent for their child and risk their child getting evicted from the place they're staying at while they're studying in college, right? They're not going to want to do that to their kid. The other thing is, what's cool is they don't always have to come from the parent. It could come through student loans, because they have to pay, take out student loans for room and board, or it could come through financial aid. A lot of these students get a lot of financial aid to help pay for their room and board. I actually had a student, it's a very interesting story. He actually never moved into the room, but he paid rent for the full year, a full, 365 days, because he had a scholarship that paid for his room and board. So it wasn't even like their money. They're like, oh, we feel bad about not moving in. So, we're still going to pay the rent. So it just came out of the financial aid, essentially.
So where did he live instead? Where did he live instead? He got a girlfriend.
He actually was back at home. He wanted to stay home during COVID to take care of his parents. I said, you could always sublease it, and I could help you find a subletter. But he's like, no, it's fine, because it didn't really matter to him, because it wasn't his money, it was the financial aid. So
yeah, that could have helped his family. But anyway, it is interesting. So let's talk about the part of the passion of well, before I switch things in our final few minutes here, is there anything that you haven't shared or I haven't asked you about this real estate process that you want the listeners to know?
No, I think you very much covered everything. I mean, like my big why, right? I mentioned was one, I wanted to create financial freedom and independence for me, my family, and for others, and to eventually be able to do things that I want to do more in life. I want to have more of an impact on the world. And I feel like just doing the pharmacy job, it gives me a chance to help others and provide a service. And that's one thing I always wanted to do. I wanted to be in the business where I'm providing a service for others. But I always felt that this is kind of a small world, and I don't want to get trapped into just doing this. I want to be able to make the impact that I want to make on the world, whether it be pursuing, one of like a passion project. Like, again, I mentioned, I want to eventually discover a cure for allergies or help others discover a cure for allergies. Right. Yeah. And so just being stuck in this, W-2 job, 9-to-5 job, it does pay the bills and it does, help you take care of your family, but it's not going to allow you to make that impact necessarily unless you have, find another way to build up that wealth.
Yeah. So you mentioned allergy research because of your incident when you were young, but you also had talked about brain research as something that you were interested in.
Yeah, definitely. I feel, okay, so this is why I care about brain research. One of my rotations where basically I interned at a hospital was actually at a spinal cord injury unit. And it's the saddest place to go. Like if you go in there, it's so sad. You see the wife by the bedside and the husband can't move any of their limbs, right? They're quadriplegic essentially because they severed their spinal cord either from like a motorcycle accident or whatever. And to me, it's a big problem. Like these people are just in bed for the rest of their lives. And it's so sad to see. And so that's one of the reasons, one of the things I wanted to do is to it's similar to what Elon Musk is trying to do with Neuralink. But be able to support companies that are trying to discover a brain to computer connection or brain to synapse connection to be able to move your limbs again, but eventually maybe even be able to do something like the Matrix where you can download something directly into the brain. I think that would be really cool, but I think there's a lot of utility there. I mean, we only use like a very small percentage of our total brain, right? Well, if we had access to the rest of it. So I mean, just like that curiosity, right, is kind of what drives me to build this wealth, to eventually be able to make decisions on those in those fields, right?
Yeah, that's right. I think I still owe you sending you the connections to some of those angel groups, Angel Medical, Angels. Actually, I get an email from the MD Angels all the time. So I'm going to forward that on to you so you can start, building up your knowledge base on what's out there, what's being developed, the process of angel investing. And I guess you've probably already gotten the book, right? You said you were going to do that, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing. So you'll understand the process of that, which is, step by step, very similar to what you just laid out for real estate investing. So I will get that to you when we're done here. So I really have enjoyed hearing what you've had to share. I want to thank you so much for figuring it out on your own, learning from your mistakes, building up this really methodical process and approach to doing it that people can get access to and learn more about by going to your website itself, newbierealestateinvesting.com. And thank you again so much, Ryan, for being on the show.
Yeah, and I hope you guys, take advantage of that free guide and the free newsletter and free tips if you are ever interested in getting into student housing. As Karen mentioned, www.newbierealestateinvesting.com, and newbie is spelled NEWBIE. And for the guide, it's newbierealestateinvesting.com/guide.
Yep. Okay, very good. And please go to KarenRands.co to get access to information about the book, Inside Secrets to Angel Investing, other podcast shows, other topics, other resources that we offer up to investors and entrepreneurs. And with that, I'll say onwards and upwards. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Karen.